Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 8-Bit Writers. My name is Gray. I am a DID system who likes to write, and today we're going to be critiquing 2 short stories. I reached out on TikTok for people who would be willing to let me critique their short story for a video. And I got one story that's quite long and one shorter, like flash fiction, I believe, style piece. So we're going to be looking at both of those today, starting with the longer one. And a quick disclaimer is just that I am not a professional editor. I will be critiquing with my experience. If you don't know, I've been writing since I was in the first grade. I started taking it seriously and really researching it when, for better or worse, I was like 15. That's almost 10 years now. Almost 10 years, coming up on 9. So that's getting close to about 10 years of experience and me honing in my skill. I'm very confident in my writing abilities. I still have a long way to go. I have a lot to learn, but everyone does. And I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned in this last decade. So let's just go ahead and get started. Alright, so this first story here is I am not in this fandom, the Apex Legends fandom. I played the game once or twice, and I'm not familiar with it, but I asked them and they said that you don't really need to be familiar with the fandom to be able to read the fic. So I'm going to critique it as if it's an original work, more or less. Normally I would read the whole thing out loud, but since this one is quite long, I'll just be reading out the parts that I'm going to critique. So I'll see you when I have a comment. I do like the use of the hyphen here for a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? To influence the inflection of the narration a little bit. I think it's a creative use of the hyphen that I am a fan of. So this sentence here, I'm going to read the whole paragraph. The door clicked open softly, and she could hear the approaching footsteps of her wife before she felt the hand on her shoulder. She smiled softly at the contact, even if pushing up the damaged muscle on the left side of her face took a bit more effort than usual. So I see what you're going for here, showing the detail of what happened with her face. Again, I'm not familiar. And I just think it's a bit clunky. I feel like with something like this, it makes sense to want it to not be like a perfectly smooth sentence, as, what is her name? Natalie, is clearly in a very flustered, in her head state. I'm not familiar with the fandom, but it seems like there's something weird going on. By weird, I mean like not weird on the writer's part, weird like there's like this here. She didn't want to stop until she absolutely had to, not until she was done. I'm very curious as to what's going on there. I don't know if that's just a thing from the fandom that made its way into the fic, or if that's going to be part of it, but I wanted to mention that it intrigued me nonetheless. But yes, so this sentence here, I just think this part of it is a bit clunky and could use some polishing. So I guess if I were to give you an example, I guess in this case I would recommend using a little bit more of a familiar verbiage with a twist. So maybe something like she smiled softly, and I would actually even cut out at the contact because we know what she's smiling at. It's a bit redundant. So she smiled softly, even if, say, it's a pain, a chronic pain disability that's on her face. She smiled softly, even if it hurt a bit more than usual. Or if you want to make sure you focus on the left side, you can add that in somehow. Something else I wanted to mention is this filter word here. So when you're writing from the perspective of when you're writing in a very close perspective, or any kind of perspective that's fairly close. I would say most of the time, this is not a hard and fast rule. I don't believe in hard and fast rules, but in general, I agree with the idea that you should be cutting out what are called filter words, and they're basically things that filter the protagonist, your experience through the protagonist, or vice versa. I don't remember. It separates you and the protagonist. So when you say the door clicked open softly and she could hear the approaching footsteps of her wife, it reminds the audience that they're reading and not actually there. So you want to take the she heard just completely out of it, or could hear, or it's most of the senses, like she felt, or she saw, So I would just change this paragraph to something along the lines of just a little bit cleaner. So I rewrote this little paragraph. This is a suggestion. I want to be clear that I am never, when I rewrite little things, I am never asking you to, or encouraging you to take it word for word, or anything that you don't want to do. It's just to give an example, so I'm not just like, do this, and I don't tell you how to do it. So beforehand, we have the door clicked open softly, and she could hear the approaching footsteps of her wife before she felt the hand on her shoulder. She smiled softly at the contact, even if pushing up the damaged muscle on the left side of her face took a bit more effort than usual. And I've changed it to, the door clicked open softly, and her wife's approaching footsteps pattered down the hall. She rested a hand on Natalie's shoulder, who smiled despite the pain, worse than usual, itching along the left side of her face. A few things here. I wanted to be sure that the sentence structure was a smooth transition. So let's see, how many sentences did you have it at? So yeah, you had it as 2 long sentences. I basically just have one kind of regular sentence and one long one, just to give some variation in is syntax the right word? I don't think so I'm not going to use it. Just to give variation in the sentence structure. And another thing I want to point out is that I used the word itching along the left side of her face. I originally wanted to use blooming, because I felt like it captured the motion of the pain, but I didn't want to use a word that had a positive connotation with it, because we are talking about what is likely a disability, and I'm not saying that having a disability is a life sentence, and I'm not saying that having a disability is a death sentence, or is like something that you can't take pride in, but it's definitely not something to be romanticized. So that's why I chose that word. So you're writing, the actual essence of your writing is really good. It's very descriptive. It's very I can tell you've got a grasp on the characters, or at least your version of the characters. And I just think you get clunky sometimes, like this sentence here. I found myself kind of starting to skim over it a little bit. I definitely recommend reading your writing out loud and seeing how that affects how you want it to be worded. I like this paragraph here. I like the assurgence of information. I like the way that you're peppering it in. I will pepper in some information. Alright, so this here was a little confusing just because of the way you structured it. There should be a paragraph break here. Basically, there is a paragraph break every time the camera moves or a new person is speaking. That's the general rule of thumb. So, and I generally find it to be quite helpful. But yeah, because I was confused. I was like, I thought it was your tea. But yeah, so that is something that I would recommend, is just to make sure your writing is as clear as it can be, making sure you're understanding where those paragraph breaks go. I know, Salem, they're important, honey. This is a really good line here. She wasn't leading this, and neither. That was not your fault. That was my fault. She wasn't leading this, neither of them were. They were doing it together. That's really cute. That's a really good line. Okay, this is very sweet. This is very, very sweet. This was a really, really good piece. I see it was beta red. I can tell. That was genuine, by the way. Yeah, it's a really good story. I would say your biggest things to improve on would really just be technical stuff. I really like, I don't usually like reading fanfic that's just fluff, because I find a lot of the times I find it boring because there's not usually a plot, and that's fine, you know, if that's what people try to write. If that's what people want to write and that's what people want to read, go for it. It's just not my cup of tea. I like that this one had an arc to it and a plot to it, even if it really was mostly just fluff. It was really good. I liked it a lot. So yeah, I would just say, your technical, sorry for, God, I grew up on Minecraft, okay? You know how you're talking and you're just running around. I'm just like Minecrafting it up. So, just look into your more technical rules. Know when you can break them. I would recommend. I'm behind on my writing YouTuber lore. I only really have. Okay. There's some videos that Shaylin Bishop has put up on their channel. That there's one on Filter Words. If it's still up, I'll try to link that. If I forget to link these videos, just check out Shaylin Wright's channel. They have info on like most things you would want to know about writing wise, and they're very talented. And they went to college for, is it college or uni in Canada? They went to school for writing, and it really shows. So. Alright, so now we're going to get into the next one. So I think the biggest thing that you could improve upon with this piece, I'm not going to read it out loud because I think it could be a little triggering, but the biggest thing that I would encourage you to improve upon is taking a moment to dig into the story and each moment of it. Everything is moving very, very, very quickly here. Big things are happening that are just being breezed over. And I think if you allowed yourself to take some time, not just to sink into the moment and actually feel it, and allow the readers to really feel like we're there and we're experiencing what you want us to experience, although keep in mind you can only control that so much. Not only just that, but giving more details. There are a few things like I've seen Heaven and Hell. That was very quick jump from I'm currently buried under 50 pounds of dirt, and then 2 paragraphs later you've been to heaven and hell. That's a huge jump, and we have no idea what happened then, how it changed them, if it changed them. And then the last thing I would just say is that there's not a whole lot of arc to it. Like I was saying, there should be some form of change. And in short fiction, especially flash fiction, there's not always that arc or change. But you do want there to be a point to the story. And that's very loose and subjective. For all I know, you perfectly clearly see a point in the story you already have. And if that's the case, then that's the case. But it definitely feels more like a, It definitely feels a little bit more like a ramble than a polished story. So I would recommend going back through it and maybe making a simple outline of the beats you want to hit, so that way you're not rushing through the writing, so you remember like everything you want to get done. You can just take your time in the story and the scenes and really sink into it. Alright everybody, that's what I have for you for today. I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you want me to critique your short story for free, I'm going to start capping it at 1,500 words. So, although I prefer stories shorter than that, you can find me on Instagram, and I'll leave that in the description. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!